All right, guys. So I'm here with Jeff Williams, and he's the author of On Foot in the African Bush, Adventures of Safari Guides. And I'm honored, man. It's my first Rob Reads. Got the glasses on. You know what that means? That means I'm reading. I can't read without them. So it's my first Zoom interview. Might be my last.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Greetings from Wales.
Jeff is coming to us from Wales. Thank you, Jeff, for being my guinea pig, man. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the book. I know you're a medical doctor. You've also served in the military. You kind of did this, like this was kind of like after you retired, you decided to become a safari guide, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think everybody's ready for retirement in terms of financial planning these days because we're told about it. What are you going to do? What are you going to live on when you retire? Not too many people think about what they're going to do when they retire. And my wife and I had, we've been long, 50 years together. We had a long discussion about what to do. And we had a lot of advisors. They said, oh, you'll be able to do all those things that you've never done at home and in the garden.
Yeah.
No, thank you. You'll be able to spend all that time with your wife 24/7. We'd be divorced very quickly. You can spend your time looking after the grandchildren. No, I love them, but Saturday to Monday is long enough. So what was I going to do? I had quite a few hobbies. I'd enjoyed traveling a lot, just like you do, Rob. But my wife said, why don't you do something different and go to Africa and learn a bit about the things we've seen when we've been tourists in the bush? So I thought about it and tried to enlist in a guiding school, a school for safari guides, simply because I thought that was a good way to get exposure. But I thought they'd turn me down. They bit my hand off, and they bit my hand off because I brought them money. It's another man who's going to pay to come to the school. It's as easy as that. And I thought it was my personality, but no, or my CV, not a chance. It was all about money. Having said that, the 7-week course that I did, which was the initial course, was really well done with an excellent teacher. All the other students on the course were up to 22 years old.
Yeah.
And so they called me Opa, which is the Afrikaans as in German for granddad, which I was. And I did the exam much against my wishes and got through all right. But we were learning to be the basic guides. These are the guys who sit in vehicles and drive around game parks, and you get within 10 feet of lions who look up at you and then go back to sleep and all of that. And after I'd done this exam, it occurred to me that there was more to it than that, particularly when you're walking in the bush, because you feel the bush better. You see all the little things you can't see. You see tracks on the ground, and you see insects, and you see small snakes that you would never have seen from a vehicle because they'd be long gone by the time you got there. And so I talked to people about how you did that, and they said, well, it takes a long time, and it does. And that's not surprising because, after all, you're going to be leading people into dangerous game area, and you need to know what you're doing, not just say, oh, I'm doing this as a hobby. And now it takes 200 hours on foot with a registered mentor before you can even be assessed. Now, that's a long time. That's a lot of walking. And by the time you've done 200 hours, you're pretty comfortable in the bush.
Is that right? Wow.
You don't know everything. It's like any other profession. You're learning every day. And the day you get cocky is the day you'll get hurt.
Yeah.
But, you know, bit overconfident, I can do this thing. You've got to do a written test. You've got to do a shooting test and all that. You have to shoot every year to show that you're still up to qualification standard. But essentially, it's bush expertise by walking and walking and walking some more.
You know,
and that's how I got into it. And eventually, after a few years of walking, I presented myself for assessment, and you do 2 full days with an assessor. And it's the first time ever that you're the only person who's armed, leading real guests behind you, and an assessor with an imaginary clipboard at the back. And after 2 days, he said, yeah, you did that fine. Or, you know what, I think we need to do that again, perhaps in 3 or 4 months' time, or whatever.
Okay.
It's very rigorous, but very civilized.
And no, I love the fact that they do that. And you know that it's a a very serious operation. It reminded me of when people always ask me, is travel safe? And I say, yes, absolutely. Of course, keep your head about you. I've never gotten into trouble when I was nervous or looking out or being really alert. I got into trouble after I got complacent,
Absolutely.
arrogant, said, oh,
and it was the same in medicine. The day you think, I was a pediatrician for 35 years, and the day you think, oh, I know all this, is the day you're going to make a really, really bad mistake. Right. The day you think, oh, yet another worried mother, is the day you're going to make a bad mistake. Mums and dads know their children better than we do as doctors, always. And if you don't listen to what they say, you get into trouble. Same with safari guides. You don't listen to that old man of the bush who's told you something. Listen carefully, because they know what they're saying, and they've been there and done it. And it was a fascinating business anyway, not without its moments, of course, as the book tells you, but it was a fascinating journey and a great thing to do as a hobby when you're retired, I have to say.
I got to tell you, I had always considered, what would I do? Will I retire? I kind of have a picture in my mind how I want to die and where I want to die. Like, what do you do?
Well, I haven't actually been thinking about that in terms of safari guiding. I really don't want to die that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Although it's dramatic, really dramatic.
Yeah, getting eaten by a lion or whatever. But
well, the funeral oration is much more interesting there.
Exactly. I wanted something a little more peaceful than getting eaten by a wild animal.
Absolutely.
While the buzzards flew overhead.
The last moment you remember is running, which you shouldn't do anyway.
Yeah, they say the last two words, the most common last two words of anybody is like, oh, bleep.
Yes, right? I can imagine it.
I messed up. I've had some near deaths, and that's what I always thought. Now, but what I liked about your book is that you're a raconteur, you're a storyteller of other people's experiences as well as your own, right? So you gathered up these stories from these other guides of all ages. Some were local Africans, some were people like yourself who just had a love of the African bush. Yeah. And a lot of them are near misses, so much so that I'd read it before I went to bed, and I'd find myself heart beating a little bit, and I'm like, because I was right there in it. And so these guys,
well, that's gratifying as a writer. It didn't start like that.
Okay.
It started because in medicine in this country, and I suspect in the States as well, your insurance company, your medical insurance company, protect you if you're sued, which in this country is not that common. In the States is much more common. Every year they used to write what we called a horror comic, where they would actually recount the incredibly stupid things that some of your colleagues had done, or the amazing bad luck that they'd had in something they'd done okay, but still got them sued. And every time they sent their annual report, the first bit all doctors turn to is the horror pages. And it occurred to me that actually guiding needed something like that, where you told other guides of the problems that their colleagues had had, either because it was wrong place, wrong time, or because they'd done something that they shouldn't have done. And most people don't like to admit to their mistakes. Now, people who've accomplished this brilliantly are airline pilots who are very open. They've taught to, that they're not going to be blamed. They may be at fault, but they won't be held up to ridicule by telling exactly what happened. And it's taught them well. And I thought I'd do that. And I compiled the book with that in mind, collecting stories from guide colleagues in Zambia, in Kenya, in Botswana, and in South Africa. And I don't think I've missed any out there. And no publisher wanted it. They said, Dr. Williams, it's a textbook. We don't sell textbooks. And it was very good advice, because I had to recast it to make it a personal journey more. They said, you don't even say who you are in it. And I thought, no, I don't, because it wasn't meant to be about me. It isn't about me. It's about guiding and walking on foot in the bush. But I'd recast it, as you have now read, so that it shows a little bit about how I got there, and then tries to link the bits rather than teaching lessons. The lessons are there if you look for them just the same. Yeah. And I mention it in occasionally. But in general, it's stories. And to qualify to get in, no guide or client or animal had to die during the event, with one exception, and that was a crocodile who needed killing. I have to say it.
Yeah.
The crocodile got what it deserved. There were two animals that died subsequently, one because it was ill and needed euthanizing, and the other for exactly the same reason, because it had been shot because it was lying on top of another guide at the time and didn't feel inclined to move over. But I didn't want to give the impression, because it's a wrong impression, that walking in the bush with dangerous animals is actually dramatically dangerous. I have never seen or never known any guide who shot an animal. I still don't know one. In the book, there was an animal shot, but I actually didn't know the guide until the story came up and I interviewed him.
Because that's a last resort, right?
Absolutely last resort. You are on their turf.
Right.
You're going to see them in their natural surroundings. This isn't hunting.
Right.
In fact, most guides don't hunt. Most guides don't like hunting.
Right.
Even for the pot,
right.
Leave alone for trophy, which most of us despair about. But that's just a personal view. Not everybody shares the view, and that's fine. But the ethos is, a great walk is to get as close as you can to dangerous game and take a photograph or see it and get away without them knowing you were there. That is a really good walk. And of course, on the way, you're talking about the trees that you can see. You're talking about the insects. You're talking about a snake you might see, although goodness knows it's hard enough to see snakes. And people say, will I be jumped on by snakes everywhere? They're big and you hardly ever see one.
Yeah.
And that's one of the issues. Someone said, can you show me a snake? Probably not, but we'll do our best. We've got a tame one in the kitchen to catch rats. Can we see that one? That's about all, it's a bit like that. So you see and you get the feel for the real Africa when you're on foot.
Right. And also, I think, like, I've seen elephants, like in Thailand, for example. There was rumors that they were drugged or whatnot, but they were tame. And, you see them and you get a sense for, when I touched an elephant, even though maybe it wasn't under the most ideal conditions, from that point forward, I became an elephant conservationist, because I saw the intelligence in their eyes. I saw they're sentient beings. I told you about the rhino orphanage that we volunteered at in South Africa. And from that point forward, I became increasingly aware of rhinos. And you had mentioned in the book that a guide would rather get run over and killed than shoot a rhino, really, basically.
Yeah, pretty well. I mean, you really don't want to, as we said before, you don't want to shoot any animals anyway.
Right.
But rhinos these days have been poached nearly out. Well, the northern white rhino is non-existent in the wild, except in one protected area, and there's only 2 females left. I had the privilege of seeing the last male, who's died of old age now. So the southern white rhino, there's still a number of them, but when you think that in South Africa alone, they've been losing 1,000 a year to poaching. Right. Last year has been less, but that's partly because there are less rhinos to poach. It's getting harder to poach. Yeah. It's a carnage, and it's awful, because they'll shoot every rhino they find, irrespective of whether it's got a horn. Because if you go half the night tracking a rhino, as the poachers do, and find that when you get there, it's one that's either been dehorned to protect it, or it's a baby, you shoot it, because you don't want to have to track that animal again for no purpose. So they kill the rhinos anyway. And when you think that rhino horn, which is largely an enthusiasm for Vietnam and China, and a bit for ceremonial daggers in the Yemen, but that's been overtaken by a wonderful invention called plastic. It defeats me as to why people want to do it. It's a prize in China to give people a gift of rhino horn in some wine or champagne. It's only made largely, not entirely, of keratin, the same as your hair, your fingernails, your toenails. And there is no persuasive medical evidence of its benefit. Some Chinese doctors would disagree with that, but the from our point of view, when we read the journals that they have published showing advantages, particularly in lowering childhood fever, for example, or some lesser nice people who say it'll cure any kind of cancer, because that sells drugs and sells rhino horn, it defeats me. The only good thing is that it used to be known in the UK that it was used as an aphrodisiac, and that's actually never been true in China. That's just an invention of Western media, because they discovered little blue quadrilateral tablets were much more effective than rhino horn at a very early age.
So I've heard. I wouldn't know from experience, but
no, me, of course.
Now, and the other thing I liked about your book is just, you know, the photos, and I assume the guides provided those. Like, here's a guide on the, what do you call that seat that he's sitting?
I think I took that photograph.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yes,
yeah,
one of mine sitting on the, yeah. It should say names of people. You can call it a dicky seat, or if you like. Okay. I don't personally think that I thought he shouldn't be there. He should be in the vehicle.
Yeah.
You do sit there because the tracker sits there to see the tracks as you're driving, and he'll say, go left here, go right here, to the driver, who's the guide. I've had to run back over the front when I've been doing it and jump into the vehicle on occasion. And I put that picture in because it just shows how close you can get in a vehicle, and the lion's taking no notice whatsoever.
Yeah, and the lion was busy eating a giraffe, so he.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Like, unless the animals are, around some prey, or it's a mother protecting her den, or maybe an elephant. There was a period when they're in mating season. I forgot the term that you called it. Yeah.
Must. M-U-S-T.
That's the bull elephant at that point, if you see that, right? But by and large, they're not out to attack. They're actually trying to get away from people. You're trying to get to them before they.
Absolutely right, Rob. I take the example of you or I in our home. If we've got children, if somebody breaks in and threatens them, their life is in danger, because you're going to take that bullet for your kids, or your wife. Well, possibly not my wife, but certainly the kids. And why should lions or elephants be any different from that? If they perceive a threat, whether you're threatening them or not, if they perceive it to be a threat, then they may react vigorously. Now, different animals behave, of course, in different ways. Take a lion, for example. If you are getting near a female lion, a lioness with cubs, then she will almost certainly threaten you. And I've been with two guide friends of mine, this isn't in the book, and it's my turn to be leading. We were going out to do some spotting, if you like, for the local lodge to see if we could tell them where they might like to take their guests. And we'd heard some lions roaring in the night, so we set off on foot. We had just had one rifle. Often we don't take a rifle because it still makes you very careful. I don't feel the need to carry a rifle, except that insurance grounds mean you have to. And 20 meters in front of me, this lioness sprang up and roared loudly at me. Yeah. And I could feel it. You can feel it in your chest. It's all very well saying, yeah, we were calm. I hope we were, but I was scared just the same. It leaps up suddenly, goes, whoa, like that. You stop, and we played it by the book. I loaded the rifle, didn't point it at her, but loaded the rifle, ready. And were there any other lions around? Couldn't see any, couldn't hear any. She wouldn't be alone.
Can I stop you right there? You loaded the rifle then?
No, the rounds are in the magazine. I mean, chamber around.
Oh, you chambered around. Okay.
No, I didn't sort of say, right, just a minute excuse me a minute, I'm just going to load the rifle. Hang on, I won't be long. No, loading it, we mean chambering the round, which you do at the first hint of trouble normally. And because you've only got one shot, almost always, if you're going to have to shoot, you'll probably only get one shot. So you're going to have to be effective. And then we back off, and you make sure someone behind you I say, tell me if I'm going to fall over a rock with my loaded rifle is not a good idea. Right. So tell me if I'm going to come, and we're going back 20 meters and we'll reassess. If she comes again, you stop again. Most lion charges, I don't like the word most lion charges stop 4 or 5 meters from you. That is expletive, beep, very close.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I mean,
4 meters away
yeah.
is 12. Yeah, it's 12 foot. Yeah, I mean, that's, you can feel them at that range. And we would not be expected to shoot one unless it was close enough. That's really difficult when it's running at you, because you're probably going to go down on one knee to get the right level, because you've got to hit the brain, which is pretty well between their eyes in a lion, and you're aiming at that. You've got to know, oh, it's so close, I'm going to press the trigger. Now, most of us never, ever get to that point. I've never been in that position. And that's a relief, but it can happen. Now, Ellies are different. In my book, the most dangerous animal we see on foot are female elephants with babies, because they are predictably unpredictable. And I think I've used that phrase in the book. They can be extremely, and they're big items, you know, and look at their weaponry. They've got a huge, heavy trunk. They've got tusks. They've got a head. They've got huge feet and weight. And they do all of that to you. And there's one story which you may have come across, which I took down, which I wrote from audio tape that I recorded from the guide and his wife. It's a guide who was working in Tanzania at the time, a man called Sean Malan. And he was alone with an young lady American guest who'd never been to Africa before. And they got charged by a lioness from a long distance, really, many, many dozens of yards, because her baby was frightened when it saw and made a noise. She charged. He got the young lady to run away, and he stayed to face him. By the time he turned back, she was on him. And her tusk went down inside his buttock here and came out by his knee.
Yeah, yeah.
And the rest of the story, which is horrific, is in the book. They all survive. They all survive. Yeah. The elephant and the baby and the girl and the guide. But if you've read that story, that is for me, the most frightening story in the book. It's not the most frightening moment in the book, because that happened to me when I found a snake in my sleeping bag one night. And I have to tell you, that was the most frightening time I've ever had on safari, partly because I was stupid and didn't check inside. And I always check my shoes and my shirt, shoes for scorpions, shirt for spiders. Yeah. And you should look for anything in your sleeping bag, even though I've been sitting on it. And I don't want to give your listeners too many personal details, but I tend to sleep completely unclothed within the sleeping bag. The snake was crawling up my leg to visit places that no snake should ever visit.
Yeah, you were like, don't.
I have to say, I mean, everyone knows the right thing to do. You sit absolutely still. Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yes. I know the theory. It doesn't work in practice.
Man, your heart's beating 1,000,000 miles an hour.
Oh, it didn't look venomous, but you're not going to take the chance.
Yeah. And people know this from watching my show, that I call it soft adventure. Matter of fact, I lean towards urban exploration more than anything. I'm more about people and cultures. But in season 1, we did go to the Amazon, and we were only there for like 3 days, but I learned an extreme respect for nature and animals. And then, of course, we went to South Africa, the rhino orphanage, which was under controlled environment, but we saw lions, hippos, giraffes in the wild, actually.
And which is your favorite animal in Africa, for example?
You had
to pick a favorite.
I have too little experience, I think, but I really loved the hippo. It was a little baby hippo with the mama hippo, but I know that they're extraordinarily dangerous. And that they're the so-called #1 killer in Africa, but that's because they're very numerous. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think there's any evidence that they are. It's always quoted. You're absolutely right. Everyone said it's the most dangerous animal, kills the most. I don't think that's true. Yeah. There are problems with what I say, though, because, of course, the only ones that you really get to hear about are where they kill a visitor. You don't often hear about them killing a villager who's gone down to fill their pail with water or has gone fishing or something like that. Most of them, like all other animals, run away. When they get troubled, it's either a big male because you're in its stretch of water, and it will rarely chase you on the land. If it won't come out of the water and chase you up the road, I mean, you're gone, you're gone. That's different if you're in a boat. Mm-hmm. I think they're really potentially really dangerous when you're in a boat, in a canoe or something. But also they get really agitated if you get between them and the water, because it's their way to safety.
Yeah.
And they may have a go at you then. I've never been too frightened about hippos. My fear is still female elephants with babies, and the only animal in Africa which sees you as food, and that's crocs.
Crocs. Yeah. Yeah.
And I do not like
Yeah.
them at all.
Yeah.
And there's one story in the book which you'll remember about, or perhaps if you haven't read it, it's about a photographic shoot.
Yeah.
The photographer, it's very early morning, and the photographer is saying, you know, I need someone to hold the parasol between the sun and me. Can you go a bit further away, That's about right. And at that moment, a croc came up and took the person holding the parasol. And she survived, quite badly injured, only because there was a guide there with a rifle who behaved extremely bravely and ran into the water and jumped onto the back of the crocodile, and then tried to find a way of not killing the person in the crocodile's mouth by shooting downwards, which is a difficult shot. Thank goodness he was there.
And I have had some experience, again, in season 1 with the Costa Rica in a river. They call it Crocodile River, and it's just full of crocs. And you go on a boat, and the guy feeds them like chicken from his mouth. I don't know how environmentally friendly that is. I mean, he would actually jump on their back and ride them around. I was like, but there was a moment that I remember distinctly where I can't remember if we were filming at this moment or not, but he was feeding the croc, and then on his way back to the boat, he slipped and fell a little bit. And at that moment, I saw on his face fear for the first time.
Yeah,
because you could tell he was trying to find his footing, and
I'm no longer in control, it says, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, because he was brave, and especially for the cameras and whatnot. Like I said, I don't know how responsible that was, but it was a fantastic thing. Let's talk a little bit about conservation and sustainability and responsible tourism.
Sure.
A big theme of the show. In my view, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously you know more than I do, what you do, and I know they say that trophy hunting is actually great for conservation. I'm kind of like you. I'm like, why do you got to kill an elephant to save one? I don't understand. Yeah. But if it works, it works. I understand the argument that they're saying, because these big game hunters, who I guess are billionaires and oligarchs, the world's got plenty of them, who want to pay 30 grand to go kill an elephant and look like a tough guy.
Yeah. Quite
honestly, somebody else tracked that elephant and all they did is pull the trigger. That's my view of it. I could be wrong.
Okay, I am anti-hunting because it's not my bag, and I accept that I have a particular bent of mind, which means I'm not a hunter. I could be a hunter if I was only hunting with a camera, and I am a hunter when I'm only hunting with guests, if you see what I mean.
Right.
I do hunt them, I track them, I try and follow them, try and get a decent view, etc., etc.
Right.
The argument for hunting, which is very persuasive when you hear it from a guide who is a hunter and very passionate about their hunting, says the only way we can fund reserves these days is by funneling the money you get from a specialist hunting concession, channeling that into the more conservation, no hunting area. Secondly, Botswana has shown this very clearly, that if you stop hunting, you make a lot of people out of work, who otherwise won't have any employment. And not only do you do that, where you may say, well, you've got to devise other ways of getting them work, not only you release onto the market an expert tracker, an expert shot. And if they have no work to do, what are they going to do? They will become poachers. So there are those two angles which the hunting profession, the hunting groups, put as arguments to propose hunting, to protect it, as opposed to those like me and you who have this feeling that, well, I'm not sure I'm persuaded by that argument. My big problem with their argument is if the money all was channeled into conversation, I'd feel much easier about it. And if I could say, having hunters there means there's no poaching, then I'd be even more enthusiastic. And certainly it's true if the hunting concession next door is up and active, you don't see any poachers on your patch because they'll kill the poachers. They won't tell anyone about it, but they'll kill them. And the Botswana Defence Force, which was removed from anti-poaching activities, is now been released back onto them again. And funnily enough, all the poachers seem to be shot whilst attempting to escape. Nobody's injured. This is a coincidence, of course, you might say. Now, my problem with it all, as I was saying, is that the money often, unfortunately, goes into the pockets of, I have to say, some politicians, some of the people who govern the parks for their country, and you'll get deals done like, well, that wasn't the best buffalo in the world, but we could do you a deal on another buffalo, like just something to keep my wife happy for the weekend, you know, maybe a couple of $1,000. And there is undoubtedly corruption within, in my opinion, there is. And so I'm told by others, some corruption in that. So it's not always as it seems that the money just automatically shifts from the pot of hunting to the pot of conservation. I wish it were so.
Yeah, me too.
But the fact, realistically, and you and I agreed beforehand, we're both pragmatists, we're not going to stop it.
Right.
And because there are too many guys who want to do bows and arrows on lions, or want an elephant, or to sit on the back of a buffalo proudly sporting it. And I get the achievement feeling.
Yeah.
For me, though, I don't want someone else to track it, or I don't want to track it myself and then kill it. I love it. They're beautiful. They're genuinely wonderful things to look at, as you've seen. And I don't personally see the pleasure, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a
It's
guy.
the same as yours, of course.
As a kid, I grew up on a farm, and I killed 2 animals in my life with a gun. Cried both times. They were like, one was a rabbit, and cry over, and another one was a groundhog. You know, yes, you're encouraged to kill those, and I still cried.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, this isn't for me, and I turned.
Well,
you know,
you see, I get the idea of a massive pandemic in South Africa, people out of work all over. Am I in that place going to stray into a national park and shoot an impala or some other kind of gazelle for the pot? You betcha.
Yeah.
But you and I don't worry about that anyway. I'm not bothered about the guy who's shooting to keep his family in meat, or they starve.
Absolutely. 100%.
It's trophy hunting that I get, and even more, I sort of understand the trophy bit, but I don't understand rhino.
Right. Absolutely. And
I don't understand pangolins, which are being wiped out on an industrial scale.
Some people seem to be more motivated. The more rare it is, the more they want to kill it. And I think they view the world through a very cynical lens, which is, I got to get mine while I can.
And also there is a big trade, even in Africa, for traditional medicine, where pangolin scales are important. Yeah. Now, don't ask me how or why, but pangolin scales are important.
Yeah. And I mean,
and they are very, very rare to see. I've never seen one ever.
Right.
In spite of looking. I've seen pretty well everything. I've never seen a pangolin.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if you ask someone to describe one, unless they looked it up on the internet, they wouldn't. And but it's just so different when you see an animal in person versus on the internet or on television. And
let me tell you a little story.
You guys do, you know,
I took my family, one part of my family, my youngest daughter and her husband and their 2 kids, who were 10 and 12, which is a good age, or 9 and 11, a good age to take kids, to 2 parts of South Africa. We were really lucky. In 10 days, we saw pretty well everything. But I've never forgotten driving through the bush, suddenly round a corner, and in front of us lay a leopard, which are one of the more difficult ones to see. You can't plan it quite so easily as you can lions, where you know where they're going to be. And my daughter, who's in her 40s, all she said was, "Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh my word, look at that." And my heart went out, because that's exactly how I feel about some of these things. To hear someone who's never seen a leopard before feel so moved by it, it took me right back maybe 20, 30 years when I first saw various animals. I remember my wife seeing her first giraffe. She said, I can't see a giraffe. Where is it? I said, it's there. Oh my word. Oh, isn't it fantastic? No, that's just a giraffe. But they are fantastic.
They are. Yeah.
And so many of them are their own thing. And buffaloes are not just cows. Yeah. They're very, very different.
No, and for someone who says, well, we'll just go to the zoo, I'm like, it's a totally different experience, man. When you see them in the wild, the unexpected part is part of the joy. You know, you don't know when or where or how or if, but when you do, it's a wonderful thing to see them. I've seen, you know, monkeys across, you know, the road, or just some weird looking deer in Ethiopia when we were there. And, you know, you're just like, what is that? Oh my goodness, you know, and you're out in the middle of you know, not civilization at all anywhere around, and the phones don't work. It is truly an amazing experience. This is part of the traditional travel experience that you might see on a lot of travel shows that I have not done. But I've flirted with it. So I'm hoping now, by reading this book, it will maybe, you know, once the pandemic is really behind us and I can finally catch up on some of this travel. I'm not a believer in bucket lists, but I am a believer in goals and places you want to go to.
Absolutely agree.
This is one of them. You know, a lot of those areas that you were in.
There's one other aspect too. If you look at various TV shows or Disney type things, it's very interesting how some animals are labored. You will never find a film with a spotted hyena in it who's a nice guy. They are thieves, scavengers, whingers. They complain about things. They're sly, you know, and it is very much the ethos of being a hyena is like that. They are remarkable individuals. And when you see hyenas for real, you realize what a hunting machine they are. They're not, spotted hyenas scavenge less than they kill.
Right.
Yeah, they'll take it off a lioness if they can, if there's enough of them. They won't take it from a male lion. They won't go near a male lion because the male lion will kill them. It'll kill 6 of them if they turn up. Right. Male lions are really, really, really powerful beasts. But they will certainly take it from a leopard, and they will always take it from a cheetah. Cheetahs, which are my favorite cat, are the bottom of the pile for being powerful and everything. Cheetahs, rare. I've never known a cheetah attack a human. Leopard will occasionally, but not a cheetah. They're real pussycats. Beautiful, just beautiful.
And speaking of, you know, even in the U.S., as our civilization encroaches more and more upon the wildlife, it is causing some attacks, like shark attacks. People don't realize the millions and millions of sharks, thousands of different species. Most of them would never even bite a human. But there are more and more shark attacks happening now. There was I think it was a cougar that attacked a mountain biker in Colorado. You're hearing, you know, I have coyotes in Tennessee when I go home to visit my mom now. They didn't exist when I was a kid. I saw one the last times.
Well, there is some good science now, particularly done in lions in Kenya, showing that when the lion, step back one, they do it by analyzing their poo for cortisol metabolites, breakdown products of cortisol. Cortisol being a stress hormone poured out by you and me when we're under stress. And so they've been measuring these metabolites. I mean, poo collecting isn't a great hobby, I don't suppose, but if it's got something scientific behind it, it makes it a bit more attractive. And they've shown that if the lion is safely within the reserve, it doesn't have too much cortisol in its poo. Once it gets out of the reserve onto farmland, where they go because there's more buck there perhaps, their cortisol shoots up because they know that that's where the Maasai are, and the Maasai will spear them to death if they get anywhere near them. And it's fascinating. Animals do feel stress like humans, and they have the same physiological response. So it's not surprising that when they're pressured into communities such as you've described, that they may become more aggressive because they're highly stressed.
Highly stressed.
So the science backs up exactly what you said.
Right. and we are human animals, right? I mean, people don't like
We are
to separate ourselves, but we are human animals.
exactly the same.
Take into account the pandemic and walking around New York City, especially I would say last spring when stress was at its height, and so you're wearing a mask, someone's not. You're seeing the world through a different set of eyes, which is a threatening set of eyes. And
Yes.
suddenly, people who you suddenly extended graciousness to, now you're extending that person is dangerous. You're seeing things through fear.
Why aren't they wearing a mask?
That's right. That's it. Like, and then by the way, I will punch you if you get within 6 feet of me without a mask. Like, I am not a violent person. I can't remember the last time I've been in a fight, but I'm like, I really, was feeling that edge where I might, come to blows with somebody if they kept going. And so, I found it really amazing how we're always, fighting that, and we're no different from animals in that regard. But as we've evolved, it's very important. I think that we are caretakers and understand that, it is our responsibility, and our survivability depends upon saving these animals.
Absolutely. And it's only a symptom of what's going on, whether you're talking about less bees in the world or less wasps or whatever. It's only a symptom. And I worry that my grandchildren, well, the eldest is going 26, so he's not the youngest person in the world, but my youngest grandson, who's 10 now, if he doesn't go to Africa soon, he may never see a rhino in the wild. The way it's going, that wouldn't, if he says, oh, I'll wait till I'm 20 and in a gap year or something, he may not see one. Now that's really scary.
Well,
really scary.
What concerns me more than the fact that may happen, believe it or not, is the fact that some people are okay with that.
Yes, absolutely right.
Making
absolutely. Yeah.
In order, and I'm like,
it's only an animal.
That's it. That's
not a symptom of what's going on.
How can you be okay with that? That's insane to me. Like, we're not even on the same fairway of what right and wrong and what the future is. And they're seeing the world in a view of only their lifetime, as opposed to how small their lifetime is compared to, humanity, or even, animal life and the planet. It's fascinating to talk to you, Jeff. I'm gonna actually provide this book as I like to pass along books after I've read them. So I'm gonna provide this to one viewer, basically let them know that if they email me and they want it, US, please, so I don't have to pay international postage.
But, well, if they
see this,
if they enjoy it, or anyone who reads it enjoys it half as much as I enjoyed writing it, they'll have a great time.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed reading it. It's what I also liked about the book is that the chapters are short and they're divided up into stories. So if you don't have 20 minutes to devote to reading, you have 5 minutes before you go to bed, you can read a story in here and keep progressing.
That's exactly what my friends who bought it have done. They say, I love the story sometimes. And then I went on to snakes because I've always been fascinated by them and things like that. So it is exactly that, and that's exactly how it was designed to be done. And the publisher was really good about making sure that the book size was big enough to get decent pictures rather than tiny little photos in a bottom corner.
Right, and it's Whittles Publishing. Are they out of Wales? Where are they out of?
No, they're in the north of Scotland near John O'Groats.
Okay.
And and the editor lived in the southwest of England, the furthest point from John O'Groats that you could get. And that's what these days and electronic communications can do. Your publisher can be anywhere as long as it's got a good internet line. Right. And so can the writer and so can the editor be all over the place.
So I don't know if they can pick it up on, Amazon through a local bookstore or anything like that.
Local bookstores are going to be storing it in the States because I have a dear friend in New York called Jill Steinberg, if she's listening. Hello, Jill. And she went to one of the local bookstores and they said they would have it in May. Okay. Amazon in this country been kind of slow, but with their many outlets, we have one called booksetc.co.uk, which provide it straight away. It's been on the market now since March.
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll place some links in the description here where I
That
know
would be great.
get it.
Yeah, be great.
That way they can do it. And like I said, one lucky viewer will be able to see it and read it for themselves. I applaud you, man. I really love the fact that you wrote the book is a gift, but the fact that it was your chosen retirement career, I find just hilarious. Like, oh, let's just go be a safari guide in.
Well, it wasn't done for effect, but it certainly has had effect. People say, "You did what?" Most people play golf or sit in the garden. You know,
man, I haven't had enough close calls in my life. I want to amp up the adrenaline a bit more.
Well, the two guys behind me, the black rhino and her baby, that wasn't the ones, but I had a very close call, which they can read about in the book, with a black rhino mum and her baby, which was my closest encounter ever, and I don't want to repeat it.
Right. And did it have you questioning your your career choice? You're like, well, why did I do this?
They don't get paid anything much, don't guides. They live on tips. If people are going there, just remember they get almost no salary at all. They live on tips, and that's a bit tough. And I don't think it's a good way of doing it, but I can't change that. And I didn't get salaried when I did my guiding there. I did it for the love, because I wouldn't ever get a work permit. So
right. Well, I tell you what, I don't know when I'm going to go, but I do want to go. And if you're available to be in the bush and to guide me, I'll tip you really well, Jeff.
Oh, the deal done, man. Deal done.
That's cool. Hey, congratulations again, guys. It's Jeff Williams, On Foot in the African Bush, Adventures of Safari Guides. Excuse me. Really good book. I highly recommend it. Jeff, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rob. Really great to see you.
Let me know if you ever get to New York, man. You got another friend in New York now, okay?
I will do. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye.